UK steel is on the brink. Tata Group wants to sell its British operations, which former chairman Ratan Tata says are underinvested and overmanned. Thousands of jobs and an entire industry are at stake. Welcome to Analysis Review. Joining me today are Diane Coyle, economics professor at Manchester University, and Jonathan Ford, the FT's chief leader writer. Diane, how have we got here? I mean, why is steel in Britain in such a mess?
I think it's a very, very old chicken coming home to roost. I agree that there has been a lot of underinvestment in the industry. So the immediate trigger has been overcapacity, declining demand for steel in China, the allegations about Chinese dumping. But I think that the long-term problem is that there has been a long period, decades of underinvestment in the industry.
But haven't Tata themselves invested millions, if not more, in their UK steel operations?
Billions, I think, but it's been too late. And I'm talking about the era of nationalisation, when the combination of very powerful unions and the Treasury holding the purse strings meant there was underinvestment then. And then after nationalisation, sweating the assets meant there was underinvestment for a very long period. So actually, I think Tata has probably done more than any other owner to try to update the British steel industry, but it's too little too late.
Jonathan, there is potentially a saviour, I suppose a white knight, or at least someone. There may be many, but we know of one who's come forward, Sanjeev Gupta of the commodities group Liberty House, who said he is interested. I mean, is his plan credible?
Well, I think it's not entirely clear what his plan is yet. I think he's still formulating it. But what we do know about it is that it will require quite a substantial amount of assistance from outside parties to even get him onto the start line. He needs the government to take away quite a lot of the legacy costs of the Tata UK, or particularly the production site at Port Talbot. And also he needs some assistance on the pension fund, which will have to come from either, I guess, the government in some way, shape or form, or from other members of the pension scheme giving up some of the benefits they're entitled to. Now, whether he can actually convince these people, all these constituents, that he has a credible plan that can actually deliver a future for Port Talbot is pretty open to question, I'd say, at the moment. All we know is that he wants to switch traditional blast furnace manufacture to electric scrap recycling production, which will make it cheaper, but will also mean that the steels it will produce will probably be at the bulk end of the spectrum, where the Chinese are pressing the hardest.
Right, and it can't be done without government intervention, is essentially what you're saying. Diane, where do you stand on this? I mean, do you think the government should get involved in a case like this?
We've got a lot more industry that uses steel in the UK. And I think making sure that the international markets stay open so that they can get their inputs as cheaply as possible is what's in the interest of the country. But of course, for a community like Port Talbot, where so many people work in the plant, there are real pressing public policy questions, and the government, I think, has to intervene. We've seen in the 80s and 90s the devastation wrought on communities by these big industries shutting down. And we're hopeless at helping the community, the local economy recover from that. And let's try and do it better this time.
Right. Well, Jonathan, obviously, closure of Port Talbot would be dreadful for that place, but also for the South Wales region. But isn't there a case that can also be made that, handled badly, government intervention could have some even worse consequences, if you like?
Well, I think the risk in this situation, obviously we don't know if there are other buyers out there or people who have a plan for this plant. I think the risk for the government, and you've seen it in past attempts, essentially, either to stimulate new investment in some of these places in South Wales, or indeed in propping up industries which are declining or in some cases, sadly, closing down, that what you end up doing is essentially you effectively give a sort of upside-only option to somebody whose intentions may well be simply to asset strip what remains of the plant and keep whatever profits for their own private purpose. And I think in this case that would be a very sad end to the whole story, and one that should be avoided.
Jonathan Ford, Diane Coyle, thank you both very much.